Imagine a world where anime fandom isn't just about cosplay and memes, but about creepy pranks, doxing, harassment at conventions, and even crimes straight out of a horror show. This iceberg is all about the moments when anime fans went way too far. Welcome to the disturbing and vile anime fans iceberg. Tier 1, the sky. My Hero Academia Ship Wars. For most people, My Hero Academia is just about kids learning how to be superheroes. But for a big chunk of the fandom, it somehow turned into a full-on war about who should date who. The so-called ship wars ended up being one of the ugliest examples of anime fan entitlement. It started with fans straight up spamming the creator, Kohei Horikoshi, on social media. His comments were packed with stuff like, "Make Bakudeku canon," or "Confirm Todomomo." Entire threads were nothing but shipping demands. Most normal people rolled their eyes, but Horikoshi couldn't just ignore it forever. By 2020, after getting harassed non-stop, he ended up shutting down his Instagram completely. And then the accusations started flying. Some fans claimed he was queer-baiting, especially when the manga wrapped up with a big heterosexual couple becoming canon, instead of one of the same-sex ships people were rooting for. They threatened boycotts, acting like he owed them their fantasy romance. It didn't stop with him either. Caleb Cook, the official English translator, got run off Twitter in early 2021 after constant harassment. Fans accused him of twisting dialogue to push certain ships, which is wild because translators don't even control that. Things got so bad that other translators had to step in and defend him, calling the whole situation straight up bullying. And here's the sad part. My Hero Academia isn't even a romance series, but a loud minority twisted it into a battlefield, chasing away creators, translators, even voice actors with their toxic behavior. Attack on Titan, Isayama Doxxing. Back in 2013, Attack on Titan wasn't just blowing up as an anime. It somehow got tangled up in old political beefs that had nothing to do with giant men eating monsters. And right in the middle of it all was Hajime Isayama, the creator himself, who suddenly started getting death threats and even got doxxed over, of all things, a character design. It all started with Commander Pixis. Years later, Isayama had mentioned on his blog that Pixis' look was inspired by a real Japanese general called Yoshifuru Akiyama. In Japan, nobody really cared. It was just a throwaway detail. But in South Korea and China, Akiyama's remembered very differently. He was a general during Japan's colonial wars in early 1900s, and people connect his name with Imperial Japan's expansion. So once Korean forums dug up that blog post in 2013, the internet went nuclear. Suddenly, people were saying Attack on Titan was low-key imperialist propaganda. On Isayama's blog, the comments section turned into a war zone. Thousands of messages came in, and some of them weren't just mad. They were straight up scary. People were threatening to beat him to death, burn his house down, even kill him with a blunt weapon. And since a lot of the Japanese looked machine translated, it was obvious that most of the threats were coming from outside Japan. At the peak of the frenzy, rumors spread that Isayama's personal info had been leaked online. Nobody even knew if the leaks were real, but at that point it didn't matter. The sheer flood of death threats had people seriously worried for his safety. Police were reportedly involved, and his publisher, Kodansha, definitely tightened things up behind the scenes, from blog moderation to extra security. In the end, nothing actually happened to Isayama. Attack on Titan just kept rolling and turned into one of the biggest anime of the decade. And honestly, at least here you can see why people were upset, since it touched on a sensitive history. But wait until you see the next fandom meltdown in Tier 2. They pulled the exact same stunt, but this time, just because their favorite character wasn't satisfying. The Gojo figure incident. Anime fans can get pretty unhinged sometimes. We've seen people fighting over shipping wars or even shrine-level obsession with fictional characters. But this Jujutsu Kaisen fan may seem to push it too far, at least for people with common sense. In January 2024, the Jujutsu Kaisen fandom got slammed with one of the weirdest and grossest viral clip ever seen. A TikToker named Azzy posted a video of herself squeezing out a used tampon over a Satoru Gojo figurine. Blood ran down his face and hair while the caption joked, "Gojo after Toji jumped him colorized." To make it worse, she hung the tampon on his arm like an accessory. The internet instantly dubbed it the Gojo figure incident. Azzy's account got banned, but not before the re-upload spread all over TikTok, Reddit, and X. And for myself, as one Redditor quote, what a sad day to have eyes. Tier 2, Common Toxic Behaviors. Evangelion Cult. Back in the mid-90s, Japan had this doomsday cult called Aum Shinrikyo. They're the ones who carried out the Tokyo subway sarin gas attacks in 1995. But here's the part that ties into anime. Their leader, Shoko Asahara, was obsessed with using nerd culture to pull people in. He literally made his own anime, a 10-episode series in 1991 called Choetsu Sekai, which roughly translates to Transcendental World, or Beyond the World. In this anime, he's drawn like some saintly superhero with magic powers, basically selling himself as the chosen one. The idea was to reel in young anime fans who might already be into apocalyptic or sci-fi stories. They pulled from other anime like Akira or Nausicaa in their materials to make the cult look cooler. So what makes it the Evangelion Cult? The timing. Evangelion started airing in 1995, the exact same year the sarin attack happened. EVA's all about doomsday imagery, religious symbolism, humanity's instrumentality, and broken characters. Meanwhile, the cult was out there preaching their own end-of-the-world story and literally killing people. So, to the public, the overlap felt unsettling, like anime and cult stuff were blurring together. After the attack, Japanese society got super paranoid about weird groups, and anime sometimes got lumped into that fear because of the cult's propaganda. For fans, it's just chilling to look back and realize a real death cult was making anime to brainwash people at the same time Evangelion was blowing up on TV. It's one of those cases where real life got way darker than fiction. The Genshin Impact Zhongli doxing controversy. When Genshin Impact first dropped in late 2020, it instantly became one of the biggest games in the world. By December, millions of players were grinding, rolling, and pulling for their favorite characters. And one of the most hyped launches was Zhongli, the mysterious, elegant Geo-Archon from Liyue. Fans expected him to be this unstoppable god-tier unit. Instead, when he was released, a lot of players felt scammed. His kit was clunky, his damage felt underwhelming unless you dumped tons of money into gacha pulls, and the hype around him backfired hard. Now, normally when a character disappoints, people argue online, maybe spam the devs with angry posts. But with Zhongli, things went off the rails. Some fans, especially on Chinese social media, got so angry they started looking for someone to blame. Instead of aiming at MiHoYo, the actual developers, they went after Zhongli's Chinese voice actor, Peng Bo, which makes zero sense. Voice actors don't design characters, they just record the lines. On December 5, 2020, someone on Weibo actually posted Peng Bo's personal phone number and claimed he should answer for Zhongli being weak. Within hours, he was flooded with thousands of calls and texts. People were mocking him, demanding buffs, even threatening him, as if he had anything to do with the game's balance. It didn't stop there. Another account leaked his address, and that spread briefly before it was deleted. Imagine just doing your job, then suddenly strangers are calling your house because of an underpowered video game character. Peng Bo went silent on social media for a while, and his agency eventually had to put out a statement saying he was devastated by the situation, but that the hate was completely unfair. MiHoYo stepped in a few days later, saying they had a zero-tolerance policy for harassment, and confirming they were pursuing legal action. At the same time, they promised to review Zhongli's kit, which led to buffs being announced later that month. Fans eventually calmed down once Zhongli became stronger in-game, but the damage was done. Peng Bo had his privacy violated just for voicing a character, and it showed how ugly gacha rage can get when people forget there are actual humans on the other end. Hunter x Hunter fandom harassment. Hunter x Hunter fans are built different, but not always in a good way. The manga has been running since 1998, but because of Togashi's health issues, it's been on hiatus more often than not, which literally is over 70% of its lifespan. That means millions of fans are sitting around waiting for updates, and some of them don't exactly handle the wait in healthy ways. Now, most fans are supportive. They make memes, hiatus counters, even petitions begging Togashi to rest. But there's always that ugly corner of fandom that feels entitled. Like, I've been reading since I was a kid. You owe me an ending. That frustration has boiled over into harassment, threats, and some really disturbing incidents aimed not just at Togashi himself, but at his assistants and even his publisher. His assistants have gotten caught in the crossfire too. Since Togashi draws most of the pencils himself, his team mostly handles inking and finishing work. But during long breaks, angry fans sometimes target them as scapegoats. There are unverified but widely shared stories of assistants getting threatening voicemails saying stuff like, "If Togashi doesn't draw, your family's next." Whether every story is true or not, the fact that they're believable says a lot about how toxic the atmosphere has gotten. Here's the irony. Hunter x Hunter itself is a story about obsession. Characters like Hisoka or Kurapika literally ruin their lives chasing one goal. and the fandom mirrors that energy. People get so fixated on wanting closure that they treat Togashi like a machine instead of a guy with crippling back pain who can barely sit up to draw. Even when Togashi himself gave rare updates on Twitter, posting sketches from bed, admitting his nerve damage was so bad he couldn't hold a pen, a chunk of fans accused him of faking it. Rumors and fake news about his health have spread, with some fans calling out his illnesses as excuses. Imagine pouring your health into this story for decades and getting told you're lying about being sick. At the end of the day, Togashi keeps trying. He pushed out chapters 391 to 400 in late 2022, followed by 401 to 410 in late 2024, even if it meant working from a hospital bed. His wife, who created Sailor Moon by the way, has openly said she worries about him collapsing. That's the cost of giving fans what they want. Aya, Hirano, harassment, and death threats. Aya Hirano wasn't just another voice actress. She was the voice actress. She was treated like an idol with posters, concerts, fan clubs, the whole thing. But that idol label came with strings attached. Fans expected her to be squeaky clean, single, and basically living only for them. And when Aya broke that illusion, things got ugly. It started in late 2010, when she went on a variety show and casually mentioned that she was dating. Not just one guy, but multiple men. Totally normal for a woman in her 20s, right? But hardcore otaku didn't see it that way. They felt betrayed, as if Aya owed them her personal purity. Some even filmed themselves burning her CDs and DVDs in protest. And then things snowballed. In early 2011, rumors started flying on Japan's massive message board, 2chan, that Aya had been sleeping with members of her backup band. At first, it was just gossip. But a few months later, the tabloid Bubka dropped actual photos, and that blew the lid off everything. For a fanbase already teetering on obsession, this was the breaking point. Petitions demanded she be removed from anime projects, like Kizumonogatari. Others sent her graphic hate mail, and then came the death threats. Aya later admitted she genuinely feared for her life, and police had to get involved. The fallout was brutal. Her label, Lantis, quietly cut ties. Her agency stopped giving her new anime roles. She had to step away from the voice acting spotlight altogether and pivot to musicals and live theater just to keep working. In interviews years later, Aya said the harassment never really stopped. Even as recently as 2023, she confessed that whenever she takes on anime work again, the hate mail and death threats come back too. Tier 3. Shallow Waters. Pokemon Epilepsy Incident. On December 16, 1997, kids across Japan were watching Pokemon Episode 38, Denno Senshi Porygon. Halfway through, Pikachu fires off a lightning attack to destroy some missiles, and the screen flashes with this rapid red-blue strobe. It looked cool in the storyboard, but on TV, it was basically a weapon. Within seconds, many kids started collapsing with seizures, vomiting, and convulsions. By the end of the night, around 685 children were hospitalized. News reports later said as many as 12,000 kids complained of headaches or nausea in the days that followed. The Japanese media gave it the name Pokemon Shock. TV Tokyo yanked the entire series off the air. At that time, Pokemon was at the height of its popularity. Trading cards, merch, video games, you name it. And suddenly, the anime went dark for 4 months. That episode was never broadcasted again, never released on DVD, never dubbed overseas. To this day, it's locked away like some cursed film reel. The scandal even tanked Nintendo's stock price, knocking it down a couple points overnight. Police questioned the producers. Japan's health ministry held emergency meetings. And from then on, anime and video games had to start slapping seizure warnings at the beginning of their shows. If you've ever seen that little viewer discretion flashing lights notice before an anime episode, this is why. And here's the wildest part. Doctors later figured out that while the first wave of cases was real photosensitive epilepsy, the second wave was a mass hysteria. Basically, many kids made themselves sick because they were scared they might be sick. The human brain is wild. Death Note threat list. In October 2015, at Nashua High School North in New Hampshire, a student was caught with a literal death note. Yes, a death note. Because on the inside were the names of his 17 classmates, each with dates and disturbingly detailed death methods. Basically, a hit list styled after the anime, where writing someone's name literally kills them. As you'd expect, once word got out, parents freaked. One mom straight up compared it to the warning signs of a school shooting and said, "I refuse to take this lightly." And honestly, who can blame her? If you hear your kid's name is on a death list, you're not just brushing that off. The school jumped on it fast. Teachers found the notebook, called the cops, and within hours, detectives were on the case. Parents got an emergency meeting with the superintendent and police chief, who reassured them that there was no ongoing safety issue. Still, a lot of kids were scared to even show up the next day, and counselors were standing by in case students needed to talk it through. After digging in, investigators concluded there wasn't actually a murder plot. The student had written the list more like edgy roleplay than a blueprint for violence. Police even said no crimes were technically committed, so no charges were filed. The student did face school discipline, though the details stayed private. The Death Note books themselves weren't banned and they're still sold everywhere, but teachers definitely used the incident as a cautionary tale. Just because it's fiction doesn't mean you can mimic it in real life without consequences. But hey, at least this one was just people messing around, because there's a Death Note case out there that actually led to real deaths, and the deaths were pretty disturbing. We'll get to that in Tier 4. Animator death by Overwork. Okay, this one's rough. The anime industry's grind culture has gotten so bad that it literally cost people their lives, and it kinda pulled back the curtain on just how brutal things are behind the flashy shows we binge. Take A1 Pictures, for example. They're the studio behind hits like Sword Art Online and Your Lie in April. In 2010, one of their young production assistants died by suicide. Later, it came out that he'd been diagnosed with depression caused by insane overwork. We're talking more than 100 hours of overtime in a single month. The death was officially ruled connected to his working conditions. And sadly, that wasn't some one-off tragedy. Fast forward to Madhouse, the studio that gave us One Punch Man and Death Note. They ended up in a scandal too. One production assistant literally worked 37 days in a row without a single break, racking up 393 hours in 1 month. Japan's Labor Bureau had to step in and slap Madhouse with a corrective order for violating labor laws. Fans were horrified, calling out studios for treating animators like disposable machines. But unbelievably, there were still people trying to spin it as some kind of honorable sacrifice, like he died doing what he loved. Industry veterans and sane people clapped back hard at that take. This wasn't noble, it was exploitation, plain and simple. And it really forced fans to sit with an uncomfortable truth. The shows we love come at a cost. We want constant, high-quality anime. Studios promise impossible deadlines, and the young animators, who are already paid shockingly low, get pressured to never say no. The Ghibli Park statue scandals. So in 2023, Ghibli Park was supposed to be Japan's new family-friendly paradise. But within months of opening, the place was making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Why? Because a handful of grown men decided to treat the statues to be objects of their lust. The photos first popped up on X and TikTok. One guy was straight up groping the chest of Marnie, who, if you don't know, is a 12-year-old character in When Marnie Was There. And if that wasn't enough, someone else posed obscenely with No Face from Spirited Away. These weren't hidden away either. They did this in broad daylight, in a park full of families and kids. Of course, the internet went nuclear. It became a new disgrace of how anime culture normalizes the mature treatment of young-looking characters. Even Aichi's governor, Hideaki Omura, stepped in, calling the acts indecent and demanding apologies. And yeah, the guys behind it got doxxed. One lost his job, another publicly apologized, saying it was just a joke. After the backlash, Ghibli Park beefed up security and put out statements begging fans to show some basic respect. Now, if you're thinking, come on, it's just a statue, you couldn't be more wrong, because this same behavior turns way creepier in our next entry. The Comiket 96 cosplayer harassment incident. Comiket is like the Super Bowl for anime nerds. Twice a year, Tokyo Big Sight gets flooded with people in costumes, trading fan comics and snapping photos. In 2019, it hit record numbers. Over 730,000 people crammed in. And if you've never been in Japan's summer heat, you know it's basically like standing in a sauna with a few 100,000 of your closest sweaty friends. Now, cosplay is the crown jewel of Comiket. That year, a Chinese student named All showed up in this mini cheongsam. It's kind of a modern Chinese dress, classy, colorful, and perfect for photos. This was supposed to be her last Comiket before heading home, kind of her big send-off. But instead of being wholesome, the day turned into something she described as deeply traumatizing. At first, everything was normal. People took her photos, cheering her on, the usual stuff. But the crowd around her started closing in. Guys were shoving cameras way too close. One dude literally crouched down, aiming straight up her skirt. She begged them to step back, but nobody listened. And then, the breaking point hit. Someone recorded her crying, waving her arms, yelling, "Too close, please step back." You can hear the shutters firing non-stop while she breaks down. She eventually collapsed onto the hot pavement, clutching a notebook over her lap like a shield. But the most disturbing part was the cameras still clicking. The clip went viral immediately. Japanese Twitter blew up with people saying this is why otaku are creepy. Western cosplayers chimed in too, saying they've lived the same thing at US cons. Some reported that she later said the experience left her shaken, panic-stricken, and questioning whether cosplay spaces are safe at all. Staff eventually broke it up, but not before she was left emotionally wrecked and publicly humiliated. And you know what? Fans who don't know their limits like this are still kinda tame compared to what's coming. Because in our next tier, Tier 4, we're talking about fans who went all the way into serious crime. We'll get into that right after the Jujutsu Kaisen Todo cross-dressing controversy. Imagine being a freelance animator in your 20s, pulling 18-hour workdays just to finish frames, and then waking up to people across the world calling you an infidel. That's what this animator walked into. By the time Season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen hit screens in 2023, the hype was insane. The Shibuya Incident arc was the manga's crown jewel, and fans were expecting MAPPA to deliver pure peak anime. But with all that pressure, and to mention MAPPA's reputation for overworking its animators, every little choice in the show got picked apart under a microscope. And then came episode 21. This was the big Todo spotlight. If you know JJK, you know Todo, the musclehead with the idol obsession and a weirdly wholesome bromance with Yuji. In the manga, we see his middle school backstory, but in the anime, one animator pitched a simple, funny gag. Todo cross-dressing in a schoolgirl outfit to help his idol. On paper, it was funny, eccentric, and totally in line with his over-the-top personality. But here's the catch. Not everyone laughed. In the West and in Japan, fans mostly memed it. But in some Muslim-majority countries, cross-dressing isn't just a joke. It's considered outright sinful. And once people trace the idea back to a specific animator, Shota Goshozono, a director who also worked as a storyboarder and key animator for the scene, the whole thing got personal. His Twitter mentions blew up with thousands of comments, including straight-up death threats. Some users even tried doxing him. And here's the wild part. Instead of ignoring it, he actually apologized. He posted in English and Japanese saying he was sorry to fans who felt offended, that he didn't mean to mock anyone's religion, and that he'd be more careful. In the end, the boycott didn't last long. Episode 21 broke streaming records anyway, and the Todo cross-dressing scene became a meme more than anything. But the damage was real. Tier 4, Mid-Depths. Rurouni Kenshin creators Child Corn. Here's one that shocked both anime fans and the mainstream press. Nobuhiro Watsuki, the manga artist behind Rurouni Kenshin, which is basically a series that basically defined the samurai genre for the whole generation, got busted in 2017 for something way darker than anything in his stories. In November of that year, police raided his Tokyo office and apartment and found what they described as numerous DVDs packed with child corn. We're not talking about a stray file or two. Reports said about 100 discs were seized, featuring girls as young as 10 to 13 years old. When questioned, Watsuki admitted he had an attraction to underage girls. His words were chillingly blunt. He liked girls from late elementary school to the second year of junior high. Now, you'd think that would be the end of his career, right? Shueisha, his publisher, immediately suspended the brand new Rurouni Kenshin Hokkaido arc sequel that had just started serialization. Fans assumed the franchise was finished. But here's the twist. Legally, Watsuki got off incredibly light. In early 2018, he was convicted of simple possession of child pornography and fined just 200,000 yen. And then, less than a year later, the Hokkaido arc was back in Jump Square. Watsuki even made a statement about feeling remorse. But it was business as usual. He kept drawing, sometimes with help from his wife, Kaoru Kobayashi, and the series carried on as though nothing had happened. That quick comeback didn't sit well with a lot of people. Fans and journalists have pointed out the hypocrisy. A man openly caught with a mountain of illegal material, who admitted his preferences outright, basically faced no long-term consequences. Bomb threat tweets. So here's one of the weirdest anime-related scares to ever hit Japan. Back in March 2015, a brand new Pretty Cure movie was about to premiere in Shinjuku. Pretty Cure, if you didn't know, is a massive magical girl franchise with cheerful heroines and kid-friendly vibes. Definitely not the kind of thing you'd expect to be tied to a bomb scare. But 2 days before the screening, a 22-year-old college student, Ikuya Otaki, hopped on Twitter and started posting threats. He claimed he'd planted bombs in the theater and even said he'd ram a truck full of gasoline tanks into it. Not exactly the kind of thing you ignore. Cops immediately searched the place, amped up security, and made sure nothing dangerous was actually there. Thankfully, no bombs turned up, and the movie still screened as scheduled without any problems. A few months later, police tracked Otaki down and arrested him. And when they asked why he did it, his explanation was weird. He basically said he was jealous of the Precure girls. Yep, according to him, he got angry that the characters were always happy, bright, and forward-looking. His fondness for the show twisted into resentment, and in his heads, he wanted to teach them a lesson. Imagine being so salty at cartoon magical girls for being cheerful that you decide to fake a terrorist threat. Luckily, it was just a fake threat. There was no actual plan to blow anything up. But the case still made headlines in anime news circles because it showed how online rants can spiral into very real police action. Toei and the Precure staff didn't make much of a public statement, besides cooperating with authorities, but fans definitely talked about it online. Producer exploitation charges. This one hit especially hard because it was a big name inside the anime industry. Koichiro Ito, a film producer credited on Your Name and Suzume, went from working on two of the most beloved anime movies of the decade to being at the center of one of Japan's ugliest scandals. It started in late 2021, when Japanese media reported that Ito had been arrested for child exploitation. He'd met a 15-year-old girl online, pressured her into sending nude selfies, and even paid her about 12,500 yen, or basically $100. Police later said he knew she was underage, and when they pushed him, he admitted he'd done the same thing before. That arrest alone was bad enough, but what came out after was way worse. By early 2024, prosecutors revealed it wasn't just a one-time thing. Ito had a whole pattern of targeting teens. Reports said he'd paid dozens of girls, maybe even over 100, to send explicit photos, perform sexual acts, and let him film it. His case finally went to trial in 2024. He pled guilty right away, which the prosecutors noted, but they still pushed for 6 years in prison. In February 2025, sentencing came down, 4 years behind bars. Less than what prosecutors wanted, but still a clear statement from the court that his crimes were serious. Judges pointed out how he took advantage of their youth and immaturity. Some girls settled with him privately, but the emotional scars were obvious. Counseling was reportedly offered, though Japanese media doesn't release many details to protect their privacy. The fallout in the anime industry was immediate. Director Makoto Shinkai, who had worked with Ito, said he was greatly shocked and publicly expressed sympathy for the victims. Fans of Your Name and Suzume suddenly had to see those titles linked to Ito's crimes, even though the rest of the creative team had nothing to do with it. Still, the association left a stain. Kaoru Kobayashi. In 2004, Japan was shaken by the brutal murder of a 7-year-old girl named Kaede Ariyama. Her killer, Kaoru Kobayashi, was a 36-year-old newspaper delivery man with a long history of predatory crimes against children. On November 17th, he kidnapped Kaede, assaulted her, and murdered her. The crime was so shocking the police launched a nationwide manhunt. Kobayashi was caught at the end of December, sentenced to death in 2006, and executed by hanging in 2013. Now, the crime itself was horrifying enough, but what turned it into an anime fandom scandal was how the media framed Kobayashi. Within days, newspapers started running with headlines calling him an otaku murderer. They pointed out that he watched anime, horror movies, and read adult explicit manga, especially Lolicon, which depicts underage-looking characters. Even though Kobayashi wasn't some hardcore collector, the press painted him as part of a deviant subculture, lumping him in with the infamous Tsutomu Miyazaki case from 1989. That connection was explosive. Politicians and commentators demanded stricter crackdowns on erotic manga and video games. Articles claimed Kobayashi was part of a figure moezoku subculture, obsessed with figurines of young girls, which turned out to be false. He didn't even own those figures. But the narrative already stuck with him. Anime, lolicon, and otaku culture had somehow created a murderer. And that's the part that really stung for fans. Instead of focusing on Kobayashi's long record of explicit violence, the media used the tragedy to fuel a moral panic. Police increased scrutiny of otaku. Officials in Nara pushed censorship laws, and TV shows replayed stories about dangerous weirdos who liked anime. The real-life yandere. If you've watched enough anime, you've probably heard of the yandere trope. The sweet, perfect girlfriend who suddenly goes full psycho if she thinks you're cheating. It's played for drama, sometimes even laughs. But in 2019, Japan saw what happens when that character type shows up in real life. In May 2019, Tokyo police walked into what looked like a horror movie set. A 21-year-old hostess named Yuka Takaoka was sitting in the lobby of her apartment building, but her clothes were soaked in blood, and her boyfriend lay down upstairs with 2 stab wounds in the stomach. But the disturbing part was she didn't even look upset. She told officers, "I loved him so much, I just couldn't help it. After killing him, I too wanted to die." So the guy was Phoenix Luna, a 20-year-old bar host she'd just moved in with 3 days before. But their whole thing blew up quick. On May 23rd, Yuka checked his phone, found pictures of him with female clients, and just lost it. I mean, yeah, his job was literally to flirt with women, but to her, it felt like cheating. So that night, while he was asleep, she grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed him in the stomach. What happened after is what made the case blow up online. This video shows cops arresting her, but she looked calm, even almost proud. So she became the real-life Yandere. Yuka had even cosplayed Yandere characters on Instagram before all this, so the comparisons wrote themselves. In court, they even found a note on her phone that was basically a creepy love letter. "If I kill him, it'll be eternal, and there will be no pain after." Luna barely made it. He was in a coma for 5 days and still lives with the damage. Yuka got 3.5 years, got out in 2023, and instead of fading away, she leaned into the whole Yandere Queen thing. Now she streams, cosplays, plays games, and people comment stuff like, "too beautiful to be a criminal." That's what makes this case disturbing. Not just the stabbing, but how the fandom twisted it into a meme and culture. Death Note murder. Back in 2007 in Brussels, some hikers at Duden Park found a torso and 2 thighs laid out between benches. Yep, just the body parts. The skin was shaved clean. The cuts were almost surgical. And next to them were 2 handwritten notes. Both said the same thing in broken Japanese. "Watashi wa Kira desu." Or in English, "I am Kira." If you've seen Death Note, you know the reference. In the anime, Light Yagami calls himself Kira when he kills people with his supernatural notebook. So of course, the Belgian press instantly dubbed this the manga murder. For months, detectives had no other clues besides rice scattered on the grass and a Japanese symbol scratched into the dirt. So of course, people think this was a debut for a new serial killer. But the truth is way less glamorous. The victim turned out to be 32-year-old Sidi Larbi Azubairi. He'd been living with 4 young men in Brussels. After a stupid argument one night, things escalated into a fight, then into murder. To cover it up, the group dismembered him, dropped his remains in the park, and left the Kira notes as a twisted homage to their favorite manga. 3 years later, 3 of the guys, Sidi Mohammed Atir, Abdesamad Azmi, and Zakaria Benaisa, got arrested and sentenced with 20 to 23 years in prison. The 4th was charged specifically with failing to provide assistance to a person in danger. People clowned on them for the sloppy Japanese, but they couldn't even spell desu right. Yeah, a guy got murdered and chopped up. But for some people, the real crime was bad grammar. Bleach-inspired murder. In August 2017, Auckland residents were horrified when 36-year-old Gabriel Hikari beat 69-year-old Michael Mulholland to death in the stairwell of a housing block. Security footage showed him stomping on the man's head nearly 90 times, even kicking him after he was down. Mulholland died of blunt force trauma. But the most disturbing part was this was a random attack with no prior connection between killer and victim. When police arrested Gabriel, the case took an unsettling anime twist. He claimed he wasn't himself during the murder. He was Ichigo Kurosaki, the main character from Bleach. He spoke Japanese at the scene, and even recited a dramatic monologue almost word for word from the show about vanquishing evil. A psychiatrist later testified that the overlap between the anime episode and Gabriel's behavior was uncanny, suggesting he may have been acting out a delusional crossover between fiction and reality. In 2018, Gabriel's lawyers argued he was legally insane, pointing to his schizophrenia diagnosis and obsession with Bleach. The jury didn't buy it. He was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 13 years. Judges ruled that even with mental illness, he was fit to stand trial and responsible for his actions. From Mulholland's family, the focus on anime and mental health defenses was salt in the wound. They said nothing could excuse the brutal way their father was killed, and they wanted accountability to remain squarely on Gabriel. Kyoto Animation firebombing. On the morning of July 18, 2019, Kyoto Animation Studio 1 turned into a death trap. A 41-year-old guy named Shinji Aoba showed up with 2 huge canisters of gasoline, dumped it all over the lobby, poured it on staff, blocked exits, yelled "die," and lit the place on fire. In minutes, the whole 3-story building was filled with smoke and flames. 70 people were inside, but 36 never got out. But the reason he did it was even more disturbing. He thought Kyoto Animation stole his ideas. His proof was that in one of their stories, characters bought discounted meat during a trip, which was also in some manuscript he'd sent them years before. The thing is, his entry didn't even make it past round 1. But delusion doesn't need evidence, just gasoline. He almost died too. The burns covered 90% of his body. It took 12 surgeries to keep him alive, and even then he was ranting from his hospital bed about plagiarism and demanding to face the studio president. They arrested him in 2020 once he could stand trial. The shock across Japan was massive, not just because it was a brutal crime, but because of who was targeted. Kyoto Animation had a reputation for being one of the kindest, most supportive studios in the industry. They gave rare full-time jobs to animators instead of short-term contracts, treated staff with dignity, and made shows that were all about warmth and empathy, like K-On! And A Silent Voice. So when that kind of studio got hit, people felt something truly pure had been attacked. In 2024, they built a memorial with 36 birds, one for each life lost. His trial dragged on until 2024. He tried to claim mental illness, but the court said he knew exactly what he was doing. They sentenced him to death, and in 2025, he dropped his appeal. Some people thought execution was too harsh. Others said nothing less would fit the crime. KyoAni rebuilt and kept creating, but the memory of that tragedy won't be forgotten. Tier 5. The Abyss. The Dark Web Hentai Rings. Alright, this one's about as dark as it gets. We're talking about lolly culture. That side of anime where characters look like kids, but get depicted in an explicit way. Most people try to avoid it, but in 2023, things got way scarier when AI deepfakes started taking over. It wasn't just fan art anymore. People were slapping the faces of real people onto underage anime characters to make realistic hentai. And one of the biggest victims was Rie Takahashi, the voice actress for Megumin in Konosuba. Fans love her because she's funny and super talented, but in certain sketchy corners of the internet, her face basically turned into underground trading material. Law enforcement had been watching this stuff for a while. By 2023, the FBI and international police uncovered online forums where thousands of people were sharing and selling these AI deepfakes. Rie Takahashi's likeness was everywhere in that content. It all blew up in April 2023, when screenshots leaked to Reddit and Twitter. The outrage was instant. #ProtectRie went viral, and the anime community was furious. Authorities moved fast. By mid-2023, arrests were happening across the US, Japan, and Europe. They went after the people making and distributing the content, plus those using AI tools to generate it. Rie herself eventually spoke up on Twitter, saying she was heartbroken that her face and voice had been twisted into this. Fans flooded her with support, but the damage was already done. After that, the anime scene had to face some ugly truths. Reddit mods started banning lolly talk. Kadokawa put out a statement threatening legal action, and even fanfiction sites began tightening their rules. Governments stepped in too, passing new laws to criminalize AI-generated child exploitation material. It was a huge wake-up call. Anime always had a problem with lolly content, but mixing it with deepfake tech pushed it into terrifying territory. It showed that when fandom spaces don't have limits, it can wreck real people's lives. Madoka Magica suicide boards. When Puella Magi Madoka Magica dropped in 2011, it didn't look like anything crazy. Cute magical girls, pastel colors, sugary opening song, well, the whole package. But then, a couple episodes in, it pulls the rug out. Characters are betrayed, killed, and chewed up by the system they thought they were saving. It became one of the darkest magical girl shows ever made. And of course, with something that heavy, rumors started flying. By late 2012, Japanese media, and then English sites like Kotaku, started talking about suicide-packed forums inspired by the show. Supposedly, some viewers who related too much to the despair in Madoka were meeting online to plan group suicides. The idea freaked parents out. because it played right into the old anime is dangerous narrative that's been around since the 80s. But here's the thing, none of it checked out. The one incident that really blew up involved a newspaper in Japan getting a super weird email. Attached was a photo of a Madoka Kaname figurine hanging from a LAN cable like a noose. The message said stuff like, "I'll hang myself." It was a fun game. Media immediately framed it as proof of an anime suicide. It even linked back to a virus attack on the paper's computers, as if the same guy was taunting them through Madoka imagery. Sounds terrifying, right? Except when police dug into it, they found no suicide and no pact. Just a cyber stalker who thought it'd be funny to troll journalists with creepy Madoka props. When they finally arrested him in early 2013, the case got even weirder. He had literally left clues for detectives on his pet cat's collar. It was more of a hacker prank than some tragic fan cult. In the end, Madoka Magica didn't trigger actual suicides. The whole suicide boards panic was mostly internet folklore and media hype. Sure, the show's dark as hell, but blaming an anime for suicide was just the latest in a long tradition of scapegoating otaku culture. Junji Matsumoto parents' murders. In 2021, police in Fukuoka found a couple elderly bodies crammed inside a refrigerator that was taped shut, and their killer wasn't a stranger. It was their own 59-year-old son, Junji Matsumoto. But what made this case make me speechless was his reason. Matsumoto had been a hikikomori most of his life, which, if you don't know, is an antisocial who never worked, living off his parents' pensions, while he hid from the outside world. His world was kinda sad. A small room, endless anime marathons, and the constant creak of his parents' wheelchairs as they called for help. But that last part drove him mad. He later told police, "It was bothersome that whenever I watched anime, my parents interrupted me. I couldn't stand it." The breaking point came in June 2021. His father, Hirokazu, had just been injured in a bike accident and couldn't walk. That night, while Junji was deep into another anime binge, his dad kept calling him to use the bathroom. But somehow, this time, he snapped. Junji grabbed an electrical cord, strangled his father, then turned to kill his mother too, Makie. He said he couldn't leave her behind after killing her husband. After that, like I said earlier, he stuffed both bodies into the family's industrial fridge, taping the doors shut. For days, he just pretended nothing happened, until his relatives noticed the silence and called the police. By then, Junji was already gone. He fled by bicycle, then train, drifting aimlessly across prefectures and checking into cheap hotels. A week later, police tracked him down in a Kyoto parking lot. He confessed almost immediately. The trial wrapped in January 2023. The judge settled on 30 years in prison. Not quite life, but long enough that Junji will never walk free as the man he was before that night. The Tsutomu Miyazaki murders. This one starts simply because he's born different. Tsutomu Miyazaki was born in 1962 with deformed hands. He couldn't bend his wrists normally, which made him an easy target for bullying. As you can guess, he grew up pretty isolated. He wanted to be a teacher, but his grades tanked, and instead he ended up working as a photo tech. The only person who showed him real support was his grandfather, and when that man died in 1988, Miyazaki was completely lonely. He even admitted later that he ate some of his grandfather's ashes just to keep him close. From there, his world reduced to anime, horror films, and corn. He has over 5,700 of them, but that obsession turned into his demon. Just one day after his 26th birthday, he kidnapped a 4-year-old girl named Mari Kano. He strangled her, molested her body, and weeks later mailed her parents a box with her teeth and ashes. The note inside just said, "Mari, bones, cremated, investigate, prove." Imagine being her parents and opening that. Not content with that, he went on to kill 3 more girls, Masami, Erika, and Ayako. He'd photographed their corpses, cut up their remains, and in one case, drank blood and ate part of a hand, saying it was an act of benevolence. He also terrorized families with silent phone calls that rang for 20 minutes straight, or creepy ransom-style postcards. People literally thought some boogeyman was stalking kids. His luck ran out in July 1989, when he tried to lure another girl at a park. Her dad chased him down. Cops searched his home, and that's when they found the mountain of tapes. The media plastered otaku murderer everywhere, blaming anime for his crimes, which set off a whole moral panic in Japan. In court, Miyazaki blamed an alter ego he called Ratman. But of course, the judges didn't buy it. He grinned through testimony, never apologized, and in 2008, he was executed by hanging. The scariest part isn't just what he did, it's the transformation. From a bullied kid to a literal psychopath. And even after his death, he left scars on families and a stigma on an entire fandom. The Can I Have promo grooming scandal. This one's messy. Back in the early 2020s, people in the online art and anime fandom started talking about an artist named Lottie. You might know her better as Can I Have promo. On the outside, she looked just like another moe artist. Big-eyed anime characters and a heavy focus on loli and shota style art, which already lives in a pretty gray area. But as you can guess from the title, behind all that cute aesthetic was a story of grooming and exploitation. Here's where it gets twisted. Lottie herself was allegedly groomed when she was a teenager. The guy's name was Tristan Orth, an older artist who reportedly pressured her into making explicit loli shota drawings while she was still underage. Fast forward a few years, and people started accusing Lottie of repeating the same pattern. By 2021, she was being called out for grooming younger artists. Her most famous victim was Catcell, a teenage animator who made edgy 2000s-style meme videos. The way it worked was subtle. Lottie would promote younger artists by shouting them out and boost their work, so this way they will feel seen and validated. Then slowly, she increased the pressure for them, like explicit collabs, private Discord chats, and requests that crossed the line. TikTok call-outs claimed she framed NSFW childlike art as cute before escalating it into full-on grooming. The leaks came from deleted tweets, Discord leaks, and archived art docs that got passed around in YouTube exposés and Kiwi Farms threads. The fandom reaction was explosive. Some TikTokers defended Catcell as a victim, while others try to be understanding by pointing out Lottie's own history of being groomed. The aftermath was Lottie deleting most of her accounts, but the archives are still floating around everywhere.